Hey there. I hope everybody's doing well. Here is a Lewis and Clark expedition commemorative knife from Boker from the year 2002. And I don't usually go in for this kind of thing, collecting commemorative knives. But this one really fired my imagination. It is just a really fun, cool knife. Wait till you see this knife. It has a lot of special features, including a unique feature that I've never seen on a knife before. So stay tuned. As I mentioned, this commemorative knife was released in 2002 as a limited edition. But the year 2002 is kind of puzzling to me because I couldn't really find anything that matched up with it. Lewis and Clark's Corps of Discovery embarked up the Missouri River on May 14th of 1804. So if Boker had just waited 2 years to 2004, this would have been the 200th anniversary of the start of their expedition. The Louisiana Purchase Treaty was signed in 1803, so that doesn't work. The only thing I could really find was in 1802, Congress authorized the funding for the expedition. So I guess maybe 2002 could be seen as the bicentennial of the conception and the funding of the expedition. Anyway, I mentioned that there were a lot of special features to the knife, and the first one would be the case that it comes in. It really is a nice little wooden box, deeply engraved here, Lewis and Clark Expedition, hinged. It's really nice. And Boker's put some literature in here for us, a little bit on the Lewis and Clark Expedition, so I'll just hold that there and you can take a look at it if you'd like. And that's a registration card. And then here's a little information on that unique feature that I mentioned. This knife includes a Stanhope lens. If you're not familiar with what that is, and I wasn't, I'll explain it to you in a minute, but it is way cool, and it's like having a little secret message in the knife. It's really, really a cool feature. Here is a little generic information on Boker knives. And so you can see here that Boker chose their canoe pattern for this knife, and I think that's very apropos for the Lewis and Clark expedition because they did explore the headwaters of the Missouri and Columbia rivers, and they used keel boats and canoes and things like that. You'll notice that this knife has emboina wood covers, so these are pretty fancy. That's burl wood from Southeast Asia, I think primarily Indonesia. It's not a specific species of tree from what I understand, but several related species of trees. But anytime you have this highly figured burl wood that's red, it can also be a golden yellow, that's this emboina. I have one other knife that has those covers, and it's this French knife. And you can see the similarity there in color and the burl, the figuring. Another special feature would be this stylized compass as the shield. It has a white or cream-colored enamel background and silver points on the compass and needle on the compass there, and it appears to be coated. That's really cool. Of course, it's non-functional. Also, this knife is serialized and engraved, so there is its specific number engraved on the front mark side bolster. Again, this was a limited edition. This was out of 300. Now, there were two versions of this knife in 2002. This version with the emboina wood handles and the Stanhope lens that we'll look at in a minute. There were only 300 of those produced, so they're the rarer of the two. Then there is another version that has American walnut handles, which is again, apropos for the Lewis and Clark expedition. It does have this same shield. It has the same blade etch we'll look at, but they had no Stanhope lens, and they were in the number of 2,700. So I guess 3,000 altogether. This knife is very well built. Brass liners, nickel silver bolsters, very tightly made. Ground flush, nickel silver pins. There's that Stanhope lens. It's a glass tube and a brass ferrule. And one other special feature of the knife is that there is a likeness of Lewis and Clark Etched into the blade reads Lewis and Clark. And there they are. That's Meriwether Lewis on the left and Clark on the right. And I guess that's the Louisiana territory between them. I'm not really sure what that's supposed to be. But here's what they really looked like. That comes from a couple of famous portraits of them. You know, you could say a lot about Lewis and Clark. There have been volumes written about them. I guess one of the more popular books is Stephen Ambrose's Undaunted Courage. But I would just invite you to go to the link that I have below to the History Channel and read about the mysterious account, or the account of the mysterious circumstances surrounding Meriwether Lewis's death. He died just 3 years after completing his exploration of the West. He was only 35 years old, and he was traveling along the Natchez Trace and was staying at Grimes Tavern in Tennessee, when he either committed suicide or was murdered. It's not quite clear. And this is really interesting to me because I traveled the Natchez Trace last year. It's a national scenic highway now that runs between Nashville, Tennessee and Natchez, Mississippi, on the Mississippi River there, several hundred miles. But early on in the trip, you come to the memorial for Lewis and the ruins of the Grimes Tavern, and they've put a reproduction of the tavern there. And so really, really interesting. You may not be familiar with that part of the story. And just to look at the rest of the knife, being a canoe, it's just got one other blade, and it's a pen blade here. I'll just say I really like Boker's canoes. I just like, you know, the angle, the cant of the blades. I like the shape of the bolsters. I like the fact that the spear is really nice and broad. I would say between Case canoes and Boker canoes, I prefer Boker canoes. I just think they're a great. It's a great pattern. I'm not sure that they're currently making these right now. Okay, let's talk about this Stanhope lens, because this is really cool. First of all, some background on it. It was invented by Charles, the 3rd Earl of Stanhope. And what it is just a little cylinder of glass, so I guess it can be different sizes, that works as a simple microscope. It's a cylinder of glass with each end convex. And you hold it onto something, it can magnify, I don't know, up to several hundred times. But in 1857, a Frenchman, a photographer and inventor by the name of René Degran, I guess is how you pronounce his name, he created what he called miniature photographic jewels. They're just now known as Stanhopes. And what he did, he was able to modify this Stanhope lens and put a little microscopic picture inside. So when you peep through it, you know, you see this little microscopic picture. So there's an image in here. It's really no bigger than the size of a pinhead, and it's magnified, according to Boker's literature here, 160 times. What you do is you hold it right up to your eye with some light behind it, and this is what you're going to see. Now let me explain that image to you. It's actually a truncated image from a color painting. The image in the knife is black and white, by the way, but it's a truncated image from a painting by the name of Lewis and Clark at Three Forks by Edgar Paxson. He painted that in 1912. It depicts Lewis and Clark at the headwaters of the Missouri River with Sacagawea, and it really kind of depicts two pivotal moments in their expedition: when they found the headwaters of the Missouri River, and when Sacagawea recognized her tribe's hunting grounds that she had been abducted from, several years earlier. So way cool. That painting was actually commissioned in 1911 by the Montana State Legislature. It was one of 6 murals that they commissioned to put in their new state capitol building at the time. So Stanhope lenses were really popular, for a while, from like 1860 to 1920. They were really popular, and they were found in jewelry and souvenirs and things like that. They kept producing them up through like 1970, I think, but then they went out of production. They weren't picked up again until the late 1990s when an American company by the name of Stanhope Microworks kind of reinvented how they were made, came up with a new process for making them, and then they started making, high quality miniature images. They're virtually identical to the vintage ones, and that's what Boker is using here. According to Boker's literature, there have, until this time, there had not been a Stanhope lens and a knife for 50 years. So, very cool, I think. Just a fun knife. I love to have this kind of stuff. Don't ask me why. But Lewis and Clark, what a great American story. And Stanhope lens, so cool. Okay, enough rambling. Hey, thanks for watching, and have fun collecting.